Okay, welcome everyone this morning. So I am Anne-Caroline Tanguy, call me AC. I run marketing in France for the public sector. And here's...
I'm Alicia Kim. I'm a marketing specialist intern for AWS Marketing Social Media.
And it's our immense privilege to be your room hosts today. So just quickly, some housekeeping points. We have 2 exits on the left and 1 emergency exit at the end of the room on the right. The bathrooms are just outside, turn on the left, and that's where they are. If you haven't done it yet, please download the app.
Yeah, you can download the app. It's called AWS America's Events. For iOS users, you can download it at the App Store, but for Android users, you do have to scan it through our QR code that's spread out throughout the venue. So make sure to do that. It'll help you keep track of the different sessions, as well as help you take notes and just keep on schedule.
And now please turn off your devices or put them on mute. And it's our pleasure to introduce you how to take mobile and web apps to the next level with AWS AppSync and AWS Amplify. Welcome on stage to Sean Shen of AWS, and who will be followed by Chris Richardson, Deputy CIO at Arizona State University. So give them a hand.
Thank you. All right. Good morning. Thank you for being here. I know it's the first session. It's early for DC traffic. But anyways, OK, let's get started. My name is Sean Xian, and I am a solutions architect in the specialist team for public sector. So I'm based here. I have been with Amazon for a little bit over 3 years, doing a lot of application development, doing service containers, mobile technologies. So that's sort of my specialty. So today we're going to talk about AppSync and Amplify. So just want to know how many of you have heard about AppSync, Amplify? Oh, quite many. Have you guys used it in production? OK, a few of them. Great. So let's jump in. First, let's step a little bit back talking about what we need to build your mobile application or web application, right? So usually you have great ideas, you have some business requirements, you lay out use cases, then you're not going to think about how my login window looks like, right? You're not going to think about how my users, to click my web application, I can collect all the click streams, do analytics, data mining. You start thinking about with all the constraints, requirements, then think about data modeling, how you're going to manage your data. Nowadays, not only text, right? You're talking about images, videos, multimedia. Then you need to figure out your platform should be mobile, native, iOS, Android, or you can go hybrid with React Native or Ionic. So you can sort of have a hybrid approach to programming once and then convert to different platforms. Then you need to think about how to do security, privacy controls, and API access to your backend. So a lot of things you need to think about. But if you look at the slide, a lot of things, it's actually sort of normal. We sometimes in AWS call them undifferentiated heavy lifting, right? So most developers have to do those type of things. So when you have the app developed, how it should behave, right? How you're going to operate. Nowadays, it has to be very interactive with your users. It has to be real time, depending upon your applications. If it's banking or gaming, sort of need real time. Then for mobile, a lot of times your network is not great, or you're going to some tunnels. It has to work online, offline, right? Normal requirements for modern applications. From a user's perspective, they working with their applications, they basically make a bunch of requests. Could be like ask a question, or just do some like CRUD, like create data, update, read, delete some data. Or they want to get notified. Something happened, like for example, my daughter used my debit card, then I want to receive alert, right? Those type of things have to be like real time. From developer's perspective, actually it's all about like queries, right? In the SQL world, like you do a select, get all the like data, name, address, whatever you need, and you do an update. Or for real-time or near real-time data, you typically do a pub/sub kind of mechanism, right? You subscribe to a data source, then something happens, you wish to push them that data back to your client, so they get alerts. Also very common. However, when the developers build them, they really want to focus on their business logics. They want to focus on the interesting stuff, right? I was a developer. I have been a developer for a long time. I am still doing coding. I don't really want to do the repeated work again. Talking about like set up login window, right? So upload a photo. I don't want to just copy paste some code or just do the same things again. But I do want my applications to be really scalable and be very secure. So that's why we build Amplify for you. We want to give you an integrated developer experience from end to end. We don't want you to do a lot of like boilerplate code. We want to give you components we build based upon our experience, our best practice, and industry standards. So the Amplify has a bunch of components. So if you look at the slide, it has like framework, which has a lot of reusable components, libraries for client side, for different like platforms. You can generate SDKs for like Android, iOS, JavaScript is supported, React Native is also supported, and we have like a Vue, Ionic. How you drive and use the framework, we provide a command line interface, so it's manual driven. Oh, sorry. I have more slides talking about the CLI, just a moment. Then we also give you some developer tools. So we have a console, we have a CI/CD sort of like a process for you if you want to have a team working together and develop and deploy applications. So let's jump into different components. First, the framework. So the framework includes libraries, and we do support, like, for example, if you want logging for the UI, if you just have the library include, have a few lines of code, we can give you very nice user interface, beautiful color, very nice typography. And if you use a CLI, we allow you to add something called a category. So the category could be different backend services. We're going to support like analytics, like different API, could be RESTful, could be like GraphQL, I'm going to talk about, and like storage, pub/sub, all those type of things. So it's a really nice like combination over there. Give you example about the UI components. A lot of times, if you do an application for cloud, like for example, you need to upload a picture, you have a profile, or you build some applications to share like pictures. You want allow the users to pick a picture, a photo. Then when they have those pictures, you probably want to get a list back and show them on your pages, right? Could be your mobile, could be your web applications. With a few lines, this example is for Ionic, which is a library allows you to build like framework to allow you build applications, then eventually deploy on both like Android and iOS. So with a few lines of this code, you can have this beautiful like photo pickup. Then you can click and you can upload photos from your local laptop or desktop. And when you have them, you can have the album to list all the pictures available, like for example, in your S3 bucket. And we also give you a callback based upon the events. So if somebody click a photo, then you can open it in a different page or on the same page or on your mobile applications. So really nice. You see, we save a lot of work for you. We already hook up all those events, and actually the backend also hooked to like S3 bucket. Then if you use AppSync, which I'm going to talk about, then you even can like aggregate with like DynamoDB different source. For example, grab some metadata or enrich your like photo so they can associate together, right? So CRI, straightforward. You do init for your project, initialize, basically give you a data structure, directory structure. Then it will create some CloudFormation template for you. So we call it like parent stack template or root stack template. When you add additional category for like storage, like for S3, or APIs for API gateway from AWS, it's going to create multiple like different child stack, or you call nest CloudFormation stacks for you. When you run push, CloudFormation is going to provision all the resources for you, create all the stacks. The nice thing about use CloudFormation is you can actually have a state in CloudFormation. Then we can, like for example, do drift detection for you. So if somebody manually go to your account, do some things, you can compare them to say, okay, somebody make things and it's drift from my like template, right? And if you only have like static website, talking about you use like tools like Hugo or make docs from Python. So sometimes you just have like a static HTML style sheet with some pictures. You can just put them on the directory, then add hosting. Underneath, we're going to provision S3 bucket and CloudFront for you to give you a static website. Then you publish it. Publish actually underneath called push, create the stack based upon CloudFormation, and then your users can just use the static websites. We also give you the capability to generate code. So when you use like mobile applications and you want to use AppSync as your backend and how you're going to call it, you don't need to write all those like boilerplate code. You can just call like CodeGen, which we're going to generate code for you. So you can just change a bunch of configurations and just use it. So we do understand a lot of times not a single developer is working on the applications. So we do give you support for multiple environments. So how it works is in the CRI, you can add environment, then the environment could base upon your branches in your Git repository. So you have a dev, you have a feature 1, feature 2, different branches. You can have different environments mapped to those branches. Then people can add different capability or features to the applications, do the testing or development simultaneously. When they finish, they can merge them together and deploy to a production. So give you a lot of like, flexibility and capability to move really fast. So a bit about cloud service. So we do support a lot of our services. So all our product managed service do have the nice thing to integrate with all our existing services. So talking about authentication authorization, that's a common requirement, right? You have an app, you want people to register, you want people to sign in, sign up. Cognito is your service to do that. It supports, like, for example, OpenID-based integration with like popular social media. You can use your Active Directory to do SAML-based single sign-on. For the API, currently we support API Gateway, which is our REST-based API service, or AppSync is a GraphQL service. And analytics, we allow you to send the events to a stream, our managed service, Kinesis, or you can use a Pinpoint, which is a data analytics tools specifically for mobile applications or web applications. So it can collect events, give you a nice, very nice dashboard, also send event back or message back to your client. So you can engage or do some like campaigns for your applications. Then we also support a variety of like a foundational service, like storage, everybody needs, and like PubSub. The nice thing is we also support like augmented reality or virtual reality. Then chatbot is also support. We do have a UI component allow you to plug in a chatbot using our service called Lex. So you can have a chatbot embed in your applications. Examples, so suppose you need somebody register, sign into your applications, and like, for example, send out a confirmation code. That's pretty common nowadays, right? Then you want also support like multi-factor authentication. So from the CLI, you basically just call Amplify add auth. After you push, we're going to provision a cognito user pool for you. And from the front end, you just import the auth module from Amplify library. And then for the sign up, it's straightforward. You just push the username or the attributes to the backend. Then for the backend, you can just confirm the sign up based upon the code user like input. They receive the code from an email or from their like text message on their phone, right? If something happens, they don't receive the code, then you can ask them to like press a button or somewhere, then you can resend the code again, and they can do the authentication. So I didn't have example really on the slide for multi-factor authentication, then you can do that easily like using like Cognito paired with Amplify. So developer tools. So recently, we also announced something called Amplify Console, which give you a very nice user interface. You can do CI/CD, continuous integration and deployment for your web and mobile applications. So it's globally available. So we're going to have this available on all the edge points for our CDN. Then if you deploy your web application, for example, then it's going to be pushed into the CDN edge point. You can also custom the domain names. So you can have your own domain associated with our certification ACM service. So you can bind a certificate, then just use HTTPS. If you're working on some features that's not public, you can have a password protect all those like new features. Then a bunch of different like features also available for CLI you can use on the console. So this talk is also about AppSync. So let's jump into AppSync. For folks not familiar with AppSync, it's our managed serverless service for GraphQL. So I'm going to talk GraphQL in the next slide, but GraphQL is a very, very popular like API backend specification for mobile and web applications. So we do a lot of things for you. So it's production ready, enterprise grade. So like for example, we do have those like enterprise security integrated with our IAM service, and you can have this sort of as a proxy to invoke our backend service. So what is GraphQL? So it's a specification. It's initially developed by Facebook and then released as open source to the public. It's not a graph database, and it's not really a query language for your graph database. So it's actually tried to address some shortcomings or downsides for the RESTful, like typical traditional data fetching services. So on the left side, you can see if you have a blog post website, for example, in order to get all the information, you have to reach different API endpoints, either by specifically API endpoint, like you can get the title or get the author, or you have to do that based upon some query streams or path variables. For GraphQL, you only have one endpoint. You make a query, and you get the data back. So the difference here would be huge. You do have the flexibility on the client side now, right? So you don't really need to depend upon your backend developers to make this API endpoint for you or make a lot of changes at the backend. So how it works? So first, you have to define something called a schema. So GraphQL does have something called SDL, Schema Definition Language. So you define all the type. In this example, I have a to-do list. Then it could be like string integer. And if it has like an exclamation mark, means it's required, cannot be none. You can have like a type to aggregate them together, associated with like the type you defined. Then from client side, you make queries, or you make something mutation to update your data, or you can subscribe to your data source. So that's three like actions or operations you can do on the client side. Once you make the query, the backend is going to return the data for you. So in this example, you can see even my schema has a lot of fields, right? When I query it, I only need like 3. So the backend is just give you 3 fields, which is really nice. Means you don't really need get all the data back together. You have the flexibility to query what you need. I'm going to talk about the backend in just a moment. So in the backend, you actually can have like a multiple data source to supply your data. AppSync is a managed GraphQL service. So of course, you need a schema. You can create a schema on our web console, or you can upload one. Then you need to connect the service to a bunch of data sources. So we support a variety of data sources. And for the data sources, you need to define something called a resolver. Why you want to use GraphQL and AppSync? As I mentioned, you give the flexibility to your front-end user, like developers. You can evolve really quickly, do like rapid like prototyping. And the nice thing is it really saves your data coming back and forth, save your bandwidth, save your battery, like for your mobile applications. So it's sort of like minor change for how things develop instead of compared to like RESTful services. So that's just the benefits. Now let me talk about a bit for AppSync data sources. So as I mentioned, out of the box, we do support a variety of data sources. Like for example, DynamoDB, which is a really popular choice. It's our key value SQL database. You can have even like a JSON or binaries into the DynamoDB table. So you can just use Amplify or use AppSync to annotate, have a directive like model in your schema. We are going to automatically provision a DynamoDB table for you. Or you can use your existing DynamoDB table, and AppSync is smart enough to figure out the schema for you, and of course you can make additional changes. And Elasticsearch allows you to do some like ad hoc queries, like search for your data. Recently, we also added like Aurora Serverless, which is our serverless relational database, allows you to use a data API to query the database. So you don't really need to manage like traditional like connection pools. You can just use a data API to query the database and get the data back. Lambda is also support. For folks who are not familiar with Lambda, it's our serverless computing service, allow you to upload the code and do a lot of computing over there. If you have Lambda, which means you can connect to any backend if you want, right? So it's just like some functions, a code running. You can use it as a proxy. You can do processing directly and return the data. We also support RESTful endpoints. If you have existing HTTP endpoint, you also can hook into AppSync service, give you flexibility talking to your legacy applications, for example. And I also have like Cognito over there, which also do authentication authorization for you. You, of course, can also have your user directory or user pool, we call it, in Cognito. So you can have all the users' information, like, for example, group, for example, the user attributes in Cognito. So when you do the authentication and authorization, we allow you to go there and get the data back. Quickly talking about the authentication over there, out of the box, we support like 4 kinds of authentication. One is based upon API key. So you can have an API key and give it to your client. Then they can just query your AppSync data based upon the API key. We also support IAM, identity access management, like from AWS integration. So you can have a SIG-V for like signatures and pass the credentials over. You can also integrate with any OpenID Connect-based authentication. So you have IDP, identity provider, which support OpenID, then you can use it for AppSync. Of course, we also support a Cognito, which is based upon our user pool, and you can do federation over there. So give you a lot of flexibility. Not long ago, we also released something called a multi-authentication for AppSync. So in the schema, you can have different annotations for different data fields or type. Allow you to, like, for example, for some data, you only want to authenticate authorized based upon API keys. And for some data, you want the API key plus Cognito, right? So for the Cognito, you typically get a token back. It's JSP token. So based upon token, we try to authenticate and authorize to let you get the data. So you can have both of them. So give you a much more control for your data. So the resolvers, we support request resolver and response resolver. Those resolvers are based upon Apache velocity language. So you can have a loop, you can massage or enrich the data in those resolvers. We do support two types of resolver. One we call unit resolver, which means you can do one thing, then return map the data. The other one called pipeline resolver. Sometimes you need a workflow, you need a bunch of steps to talk in different data sources and get the data back, aggregate them, and push to your front end because your front end has a very specific query, for example. Then you can use the pipeline resolver, which is really powerful. So back to Amplify, if you want to associate to AppSync, it's really easy. As I mentioned, you just need to run Amplify add API. Then it's going to ask you some questions, like would it be RESTful? Would it be like AppSync? Then you choose like AppSync. Then you do push. We're going to provision the AppSync service for you. And then in the schema, you can just come up with your own fields, types. I want to point out, like here we have the model, so which means for this type, we're going to provision a DynamoDB table for you automatically. So you don't really need anything if you have those type of like a directive or annotation over there. For the auth, then we know you need some authorization over there. So you also, of course, in your application, you need to write some code to hook up with the backend, right? So it's also straightforward, and you can just fetch and get the query. For people play with like GraphQL, we do support Apollo, which is a popular GraphQL client. You can also use our SDK. Then if you use like Android, iOS, then you can just use a code gen, generate the code and plug it into your applications. So another example, a lot of times we understand like it's very common for people to upload an object or file into S3 bucket and later on either get it back or display a picture. So we do have some support like for S3 directly. So in this example, you define S3 object type. Then in the profile picture, you can just reference it. When your front end calls it, go through AppSync, the schema, then for the DynamoDB, you can fetch some metadata or any data you want. Then for this specific like type, AppSync is smart enough to go to S3 to fetch the object back and send the bucket key and the region for you. So in the front end, you can just display it or play with the data. And you can also like have those type allow you to do input. So you can allow your users to upload the S3 file object. Then AppSync is going to save the object into a bucket automatically for you. So very little like configuration and the plumbing. Then you have all those capabilities. Then we do have examples over there. Subscription. So as I mentioned, real time or near real time is really important for like modern applications. So it's usually based upon pub/sub. AppSync out-of-box support MQTT-based pub/sub. It's a lightweight protocol based upon WebSocket. So when your client subscribes to certain data source, any mutation, which means update, deletion on the backend happens or from some other client for this particular data, AppSync is publish an event back to your front end. Typical question would be, what if somebody just go to a DynamoDB, just change my data without like mutate or go through AppSync? If that happens, you can create some local resolver in AppSync and send the event back to the front end, so the front end still knows something changed. So the other benefit or feature for AppSync is you actually can mix different data sources. So in this example, you can see your front end can add, like, for example, blog post to DynamoDB, and you also want sometimes people search based upon some keywords in your blog post. So you can hook into Elasticsearch. Then, like, for example, people add a blog post, then you can index the data keywords in Elasticsearch. Then when they need the data back, you can have, like, for example, pipeline resolver to get the data from different data source and send them the blog post, the title, the author, and some keywords from Elasticsearch or any search results from Elasticsearch. So that's really popular and powerful. And the other thing I want to mention is, suppose you have a multiple DynamoDB tables, right? One user table, one blog post table. Sometimes you want to aggregate them and send the data back to your front end. We do support out-of-box, like batch operations. You can query or update multiple tables simultaneously. So with some configurations and specify the tables, it's really easy for you to do. And the other last feature I want to mention is conflict resolution. When you're offline, so like, for example, Jane is going to create a new document, make some changes. She's going offline. Then when she's offline, maybe on an airplane or somewhere, she makes additional changes. Then you have John comes in to update the document, create different versions, right? That at the end, when Jane comes back, you want them to update the document. Then because they both make changes, you could have like conflicts. AppSync actually has a built-in support to resolve those conflicts. So we give you different strategies. For example, server wins, which means any data on the server would be your latest data. Or server can do a silent reject. There's already change, you come in, you're late, and it's going to reject the data. Or you can build some custom logic. So in the schema, you can specify conditions for some types, and based upon the conditions, you can say, okay, I have to invoke Lambda function to do some data processing based upon some business logics that the data into database or reject it. Finally, you have the option to let the client to resolve the conflict. So you can create something called a client resolver. Then specify the data of version, push to AppSync. AppSync is going to compare those versions. If somehow an old version arrives, the data has already been updated, then there's conflict, it can push, give you some status or message back to your front end, then your front end can make the decision or prompt your users to resolve the conflict. So you can have this as an option, then you can mix them together actually. So last thing before I hand to Chris is talking about other capabilities. So it's enterprise-ready, production-ready service. We always give you capabilities like monitoring, right? Logging and testing. So as you know, in AWS, we give you CloudWatch, which is our logging and monitoring service. So you can always find the logs in CloudWatch. And CloudTrail is our managed service give you auditing trails and look at who is calling which APIs. So you will also have this kind of capabilities in CloudTrail. And a lot of times you want to test your resolver. Like for example, you make changes to your velocity template language, right? You want to test it. And for the resolvers, they always receive something called context. Have the bunch of metadata. You can create your context. Like here, I have some sample context. Like have some mock data into your context and test the resolver on the console. So if you play with Lambda, it's sort of like Lambda testing as well. You have some mock data, then you can test your Lambda functions and have your result available in CloudWatch. And of course, when you have CloudWatch, you can always pipe the data to different destinations, either like Datadog or Splunk, any partners, or Elasticsearch. You can do search and Kibana to have a visualization over there. So with that, I'm going to hand to Chris, talking about their experience about AppSync. Welcome, Chris. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, so my name is Chris Richardson. I'm with Arizona State University. My title is Deputy CIO, responsible for IT development, mobility platforms, and smart cities initiatives. And thanks for that, Sean. Think of this part as kind of reinforcing what you just heard with a specific example. And we're a little ahead of schedule, so I'm curious to see who's here. Can we get a quick show of hands? Who represents education? Universities? Okay. And good. Good to see a few. But don't look at this through the lens that this will only be applied to universities. And AppSync is pretty amazing in what it does and it unleashes for data. Who here represents maybe the municipality side, state, city, local? Okay. How about agency side? Okay, few. How about those that are considering in the vendor ecosystem that are that are building solutions? Okay. Wow, that was only about half of so either people are not paying attention, but hopefully we'll bring it forward. All right, so again, my name's Chris. Quick note about Arizona State University, a lot of folks don't know. We're actually, since US News and World Report started ranking on innovation 4 years ago, we are #1. Head of MIT, head of Stanford. We've been #1 ever since they started the rankings. And one of the things when we got brought in the second year, people started saying, well, how are you innovative? And so we started thinking, okay, well, how do we prove that? Well, one thing we thought is patents. So about 15 years ago, we were ranked around 250th in the world in patents. Up until last year, we've been climbing. We got 17th in the world in patents. And this year, literally 2 weeks ago, 10th in the world in global patents for universities. So, and I only would say that just because I don't think people think of Arizona State as something different. I mean, our engineering department for students is larger than the entire school of Georgia Tech. It's larger than the entire school of MIT, just in terms of engineering students. So I'm actually blessed. I get some great people working on this app. We have about 12 student workers that contribute to production. Okay, so that's a little bit about ASU. And you heard John say, AppSync is about data. One thing that we knew is if we're going to really recreate the experience for our learners, we need to be data-driven, and that's real-time, offline as well. So here's some of the factors. We were pretty nervous before AppSync came out about how we were going to handle some of these challenges. Our product was going live with a beta version in April of 18, and full launch with last year's fall semester, August of 18. So some of the things we were looking at, how do we scale? Our target is to have over 200,000 learners in a few short years. But we've already surpassed what it says there. We have 91,000 unique downloads from our app. We just launched an alumni version, and so we're going to pass 200,000 learners. But we also have, just in the Phoenix Valley, we have over 450,000 alumni. So we have to scale. You can see we're already doing 500,000 monthly sessions. That just keeps climbing as the adoption goes, and we keep releasing new feature sets. So we need 24/7 uptime and to be able to handle surges, especially beginning of school year, when we have games or athletic events, something like that. To get to the data, we didn't want to recreate everything. We have tons of systems, and so again, AppSync and the AWS infrastructure allows us to pull in things that we've already invested in, all sorts of backend systems, and make sure that they're secure and connected end-to-end, as well as just new APIs. I mean, you can plug things in all the time. We've brought in ticketing systems. We've brought in bookstore information. We've brought in transit information. I mean, we're effectively just connecting any data sources we can in a secure way to get a rich feature set. The personas, so who it is we're building for is changing rapidly. I mean, we've got different types of students. We've got staff and faculty. We've got all sorts of breakouts of who those are. Like I mentioned, alumni. We also have an unauthenticated version. We're starting to learn who's coming to use it. We're changing our relationship with our adjacent cities. So it's really exciting there. But again, the reason why we designed it, it's all about the engagement, right? What constituent is doing what at what time, and how do we make sure that the sockets work for that from the front end to the back end. And by the way, if you want to hear more about the story of the app and not applied to AppSync, there's a session tomorrow that I'm leading about that. Okay, so why we love it? Again, you heard Jean say that it actually is efficient. It improves the use of our resources. We reduced more than 50 gateways, resource on there, on our API gateway. And so the team was super excited because now we can get the data in a much more efficient way. The queries are easier. It's secure. So you heard a lot about the integration with identity. We use the tokens to retrieve the student's own data. We have FERPA laws we have to hold to. But again, as we get into all those personas, we have to be unique in how we're calling to identity. It's transparent, so we can control what's passing to the app. And because of that, it's real time as well. It's amazing when you use an app and you see the latency in just a very brief amount. We are pretty impressed at the capabilities and how we've been able to render data back to the user without them even realizing how much data is flowing to them at their fingertips. Freedom, I talked about the data sources. This is just showing a few of those data sources we use. We had, like I said, over 20 of them. The offline piece is amazing. When you can still do things when you're not connected, brief periods, or however you're using and navigating. The students love the fact that they don't lose functionality as they're navigating our environment. And the one thing our technical team loves is the fact that we're pulling in all of this information, and it doesn't require work to do so once you load it correctly. So we bring in all sorts of university news from different sources, all sorts of events, all the student clubs, and as we percolate into new personas, we'll have a number of other opportunities for data sets there too. So now I'm going to go into some specific examples and call out kind of how AppSync works. Again, our main core of starting this journey to build the app was around student engagement. And one of the hunches that we track is that in order to get the students the best return, they want to obviously stay in school and they want to get the quickest path to graduation. And so we put a lot of time and effort into improving metrics around that. One of the things we've seen, though, is the correlation of having a sense of community. And whether that's through the friends they make, the ability to then learn more about what their friends are doing. So we actually built a social component. When you're connected, again, we have to follow FERPA laws, so we've put a lot of design elements into how they connect, what they can see. But you can then see what your friends, who's in your classes. You can see what events they sign up for. You can see which events they check in. And the technical challenge is how do you then fetch all this information in real time and not bog things down? And AppSync allowed us to subscribe hundreds of users simultaneously and get all that information in real time. It also leads into the next piece. We are in beta where we are going to now allow the students to go deeper and have chat with their friends so they can now find out, oh, I see you're signing up for this event. When are you going to head over there? Or, hey, class just finished. Can we go and dig in more to this topic? We're really excited about this. And again, we were not sure how we'd get the real-time socket connections to handle this flow, and AppSync fits nicely to allow simultaneous chat sessions. At some point, we might even look into one-to-many, but again, out of the box, allows it to scale. Surveys, this is one where if I were up here as a professor and you were all a student, you'd have to get out these clickers and you have to pay for them, and there's all sorts of weird, and we just figured, well, why can't they just use the device? We haven't rolled this out in full scale yet because there's some things we have to work through, but we've been piloting how they can use the app to actually do surveys. We've actually pushed surveys. Now, in terms of them being authenticated in the way that it's something academic that actually can go towards a record, that's a whole different story. But in terms of being able to get real-time information that the professor can then benefit from, again, it sends the data to the dashboard via subscriptions. It's all in real time, so another use case we've been exploring. And then athletics, this is kind of a fun one. In fact, working through a partnership with Intel, this was the genesis of a lot of what has happened. About 4 years ago, we got some sensors in our stadium, and one of the things we wanted to do was fan engagement. In terms of AppSync in our app, how do you make the experience part of something that the fan can see differently? And so through our app, you just hold it up. Actually, don't know if I have Wi-Fi on. I probably won't do that. But you can literally just turn it on, and instead of having to click back and forth, literally it'll flash between maroon and gold. And it's pretty neat how the students will light it up. In fact, one game this year, we were rated by, I think ESPN Taco Bell is the #1 student section in America, which is pretty amazing. We beat Michigan State, and a big part was our fan experience. We can also, similar to polling, we can do trivia where it's engaging to the audience. And then this last one's kind of interesting. Back to that Intel investment, what it allowed us, we have sensors all over the stadium. There's sound games we've played. For those that have been to a stadium, as far as we know, we're the only stadium in the world, and I've talked to NBA, NFL, hockey, baseball, that actually has a sound game with real sound. And we can then place who is the recipient of the loudest section. We can push them a notification. Similarly, when you go to games where there's just like something that gets the fans excited, where they're watching cars race on the jumbotron or whatnot. I mean, here literally you could put it into your app. You'd know who got it. And if you wanted to send a smart advertisement, I mean, this is where it really gets interesting. We do a lot with Coca-Cola in our current contract. If they had smart vending, it'd be a nice way to engage the fans where they're at. And so, yeah, these are some of the things we've done with AppSync. And as we close it out again, it's just amazing when you're trying to design for optimizing data. You need to make sure that you're collecting it in a way that you're providing the best experience in real time, both on and offline. And for us, AppSync worked great. I did want to say, I guess there's a couple related breakouts. I know mine well, which is tomorrow, and I think it's at 2:30 p.m. It's actually more story about how we designed to build this app and some deeper parts there. But you can see there's also accelerating app development with AWS Amplify. What time is that one? This afternoon, because mine's tomorrow. And then I don't know when the mission mobility one is. Do you know? Is that tomorrow as well? Okay, great. And then we aren't set up to take questions here in the room through speakers or whatnot, but Shang and I will be just waiting to hang out. If you do have questions, we'd be happy to answer them. So thanks for the time.